They looked at her coat before they looked at her pages. She stepped into the building like a whisper no one invited. Nora James wore a coat that had outlived winters and washing machines. Its seams frayed like nerves, and one button clung on by sheer will. Her shoes, softened by rain and rejection, whispered across the marble floor. In her arms, a bundle wrapped in brown paper, tied with string and trembling hope. The receptionist glanced up. Pause. Frown. The corners of her mouth curled not quite into a smile, more like a smirk in waiting. "Can I help you?" she asked, as if she hoped the answer was no. "I'm here to submit a manuscript," Nora said softly. She held it out. It was handwritten, over 300 pages, the corners bent like old secrets. The receptionist blinked. "Handwritten?" She let the word hang in the air like something spoiled. A junior editor, slick hair and a silk tie, passed by. He caught the title on the first page, The Ember Feather, and barked a laugh so loud it bounced off the walls. "A boy wizard with a bird? Seriously?" Someone behind him joined in, mimicking wand flicks with a pen. "Watch out, folks. We've got another kitchen witch." Another editor took the manuscript between two fingers as if it might stain, then dropped it into the trash can beside the desk. A thud. Final. Nora didn't flinch. She stepped forward, retrieved it gently, dusted off the cover like she was tucking in a child. Then she nodded. Not to thank them, to reject them back. Magic was born beside a microwave, not a castle. The apartment above the bodega smelled like oil and old onions. The radiator coughed like a lifelong smoker. Pipes rattled at night like the building itself was shivering. This was home. Nora shared the single-room flat with her daughter June, who slept on a twin mattress tucked in the corner beneath a string of flickering fairy lights. Most nights, Nora wrote while June dreamed. The kitchen table wobbled, so she propped one leg with a folded paperback. The light buzzed above her head, casting long shadows on pages covered in her looping script. She wrote with a pen she'd found on the subway and a spiral-bound notebook from the dollar store. No laptop, no desk, just stories scratched into the silence like spells no one else believed in. Finn Wilder came alive there, between toast crumbs and unpaid bills. A boy who lived in a boarding house with no heat, who found an ember feather glowing beneath his floorboards. Nora gave him her fears, her hunger, her hope. She gave him the voice she never used. Sometimes June would wake and crawl into her lap, watching her write. "Is Finn real?" the little girl asked once, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Nora smiled. As real as anything worth dreaming about. When the power flickered or the rain leaked through the window frame, she kept writing. Not for agents or applause, for the kids who were told they weren't special. For her daughter, curled beside her in a nest of second-hand blankets. For herself, because if magic was going to exist, she'd have to write it into being. Her mailbox became a graveyard for hope. They never slammed the door. They slipped her rejection through the slot, clean and quiet, as if mercy lived in paper cuts. The first few arrived days apart, white envelopes with crisp logos and embossed return addresses. "Thank you for your submission." The words that followed were always the same, dressed in courtesy but sharp beneath. "It doesn't align with our current direction." The voice lacks maturity. "We are not accepting handwritten manuscripts." Some letters were almost kind, but others weren't. One, from Crownwell Books, read, "Your imagination outruns your grasp of story structure. Please read more before you write." Another, scrawled in red ink across the first page of her submission, said, "A woman writing about magic? Maybe try romance." She kept every one of them. Not out of pride, out of defiance. Each letter she unfolded with care. She'd trace the ink like it was a challenge carved into her skin. Then she'd flatten it, press it into the drawer beside her desk, next to the stamps she could barely afford, and the copies of her manuscript she'd wrapped in brown paper and hope. That drawer groaned now. Some nights she'd open it and stare, not for pity, not for pain, but to remember what it took. Rejection didn't destroy her. It fed her. Every no stitched something tighter in her chest. Every cruel comment hardened the spine of her story. If they wouldn't see it, she'd make it louder. If they wouldn't read it, the kids would one day shout it. And when her hand trembled, she'd grip the pen tighter. Because 1,000 closed doors meant nothing if one child somewhere, someday, would open her book and feel seen. The world didn't whisper behind her back. It laughed to her face. It wasn't just letters anymore. The rejection followed her down aisles and into bookstores. One afternoon, at a dusty corner shop where she sometimes browsed used paperbacks, Nora overheard her own manuscript being mocked aloud. A woman in stilettos and sharp lipstick, the same junior editor who'd returned her envelope weeks before, stood near the register, laughing with the shop owner. "You won't believe this," she said, flipping through a stack of new submissions. "There's this handwritten fantasy from a single mom. I told the team to recycle it before it stains our desk." The man behind the counter smirked. "Probably just needs pity. Bet she thinks it's the next Harry Potter." "She looked like she crawled out of a laundromat," the editor added. "Some sad Cinderella without the magic." Nora stood one aisle over, flipping through a battered copy of a Ray Bradbury novel. Her fingers paused on the pages, but she didn't move. Their voices reached her like cold air through a crack in the wall. Another customer joined in. "Maybe she'll cast a spell to get published," he chuckled. They all laughed, loud, careless laughter that stuck to the walls. Nora didn't turn around. She closed the book gently and returned it to the shelf. Her breath was steady, but her hands ached to hold a pen again. She left without buying anything, but by the time she reached the diner near Penn Station, her notebook was already open, and Finn Wilder was about to discover that the ember feather could burn. She wrote her rebellion in ink, not in rage. The diner was no refuge that day. Her usual booth, the one near the cracked window, with the seat that dipped in the middle, was still there, but the air had changed. It carried Snickers instead of steam. A group of publishing interns had flooded in, their laughter loud, their coats expensive, their entitlement louder. "That's her," one of them whispered, just loud enough. "The wizard lady, still scribbling her kitty spells." Another strolled past her table and leaned over, peering at the open notebook like it was a curiosity in a petting zoo. "Let me guess. A magic feather that saves the orphan boy." His friend cackled, mimicking one motions with a sugar packet. "Bet she thinks bookstores are begging for this stuff." Even the waitress joined the act. She set Nora's coffee down with a thud, dark liquid sloshing over the rim. "Dreamers like you clog up the good seats," she muttered. Nora said nothing, not because she was scared, because she was writing. Her fingers curled tighter around the pen. On the page, Finn Wilder stood in a frost-covered forest, face to face with a shadow beast, clutching the glowing ember feather. He was scared too, but he didn't run. Neither did she. The boy in the story raised the feather. Nora kept writing. The jeers, the clatter, the cold coffee, they faded into static. Her pen carved a reply the world couldn't interrupt. She wouldn't shout back. She would write forward. Her future was tossed away with yesterday's lunch. She went to Ridgway's office one last time. Not because she thought they'd say yes, not anymore, but because something inside her, call it pride, call it a dare, wanted them to see her face when they refused her again. The lobby was polished glass and polished people. She wore the same fraying coat. The manuscript, newly taped at the spine, pressed close to her ribs like a heartbeat. Martin Hale stood near the elevators, flanked by 2 assistants. She recognized him from the rejection letter, the one that read like it had been written between expensive dinners. He saw her. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're the feather lady, right?" He took the manuscript from her, flipped through a few pages without reading. His lips curled, still handwritten, charming. Then he did it. With 2 fingers, like it was something sticky, he dropped the entire bundle into the office recycling bin. A few pages fluttered, landed atop a stack of discarded lunch menus and memo drafts. "You know," he added, sipping his coffee, "some people mistake daydreaming for talent. You should focus on your daughter. Leave stories to the professionals. Laughter, not cruel, just indifferent." That was worse. Nora didn't speak. She didn't reach into the bin right away. She stood still for a long breath, as if memorizing the feel of that moment. Then she knelt, lifted her story out, page by page, smoothed each one gently, her hands calm. When she left the building, the cold wind cut through her coat. But the story she carried, it had just become unstoppable. She had nothing left to lose except her story. The envelope was plain, no crest, no gloss, just her name, misspelled slightly, and a stamp half torn. She almost didn't open it. The pile of rejections had taught her to expect silence wrapped in formality. But something about this one, its crooked fold, the ink that bled slightly in the rain, felt human. The letter was handwritten, not typed, not mass-produced. It was from a woman named Margaret Cole, editor at a struggling indie press called Larklight Books. The tone was blunt, almost apologetic. "We're on the edge of shutting down," it read. "We can't promise much, but I read your story and I didn't stop. That has to count for something." Nora sat at her kitchen table, the radiator clicking behind her like applause. Her hands trembled as she reread the line. "We can print 1,000 copies, but use initials. The market's cruel to female fantasy authors. No one needs to know you're a woman." She stared at that sentence for a long time. Nora James. No, not this time. She signed the contract as N.J. James, her jaw tight, her pen steady. The name was theirs to sell, but the words were hers. And so the Ember Feather was born. Not with fireworks, not with a fanfare, just ink and initials. A whisper in a storm. But a whisper, if repeated enough, becomes a voice. No banners, no interviews, just a shelf and a whisper. The books arrived in a cardboard box. No signing event, no press release, just a single phone call from Larklight. "It's done. You should see them." Nora took the train to a tiny bookstore in East Boston, where the floor creaked and the owner brewed coffee behind the register. She found her book on the lowest shelf, nestled between a dusty guide to birdwatching and a clearance copy of an outdated cookbook. The cover was plain, a feather drawn in gray ink, its tip glowing amber. No blurbs, no quotes, just the title, The Ember Feather by N.J. James. She knelt, fingertips grazing the spine. No one in the shop noticed. A child nearby was whining about candy. A man in a suit scrolled through his phone. Life kept moving. She didn't cry. She bought one copy, just one. She took it home and read it cover to cover that night. Not as the writer, but as the girl who once believed her voice didn't matter. She found every flaw, every strength, every page that should have been cut, every line that still burned. And when she closed it, she whispered aloud the final sentence. Not for the world, just for her. It started with a teacher's voice and ended with the world listening. The spark didn't come from a review. It came from a classroom. Ms. Patel, a third-grade teacher in a public school in Chicago, picked the Ember Feather off a forgotten shelf and read the first chapter to her students during story hour. She expected fidgeting, doodles, whispers, but they sat still. By chapter 3, one child was leaning forward, mouthing every word. Another was scribbling a drawing of a boy holding a glowing feather. Ms. Patel sent Nora a letter. It was handwritten, shaky in places, with crayon smudges from a student who helped decorate the envelope. They cried when Finn found the feather. They begged me to keep reading. Nora read that letter in the same diner where she'd once been mocked. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched. Her hands trembled around the paper like it was made of fire. Then came the blog post. A teenage girl in Minneapolis wrote, "The boy who wasn't chosen chose himself. I've never felt so seen." It went viral. Thousands of likes, comments from kids, teens, adults, strangers, who clung to that line like armor. Bookstores began to run out. Teachers ordered classroom sets. Librarians tucked the novel into staff picks with trembling hands. Fan art flooded Tumblr and TikTok. Finn standing in the frostwoods, the ember feather pulsing in his grip. A video surfaced of a child in a hospital bed, tubes taped to her arms, reading The Ember Feather out loud. Her voice was weak, but when she reached the final line, she smiled, and someone captured that moment. That smile became the face of the story. News outlets picked it up. The book that brought magic back. They didn't know who N.J. James was, but they knew they had felt something real, and real spreads fast. She didn't dress to impress. She dressed to finish the story. The invitation was embossed, the kind you don't mistake for junk mail. Rosedale Grand Hall, National Literary Gala, guest of honor, N.J. James. Nora almost didn't go. June had a cold, and the train fare wasn't cheap. But the editor at Larklight insisted, sending a ticket and a note scribbled in the margins, "You've already won. Now let them see you." She wore a pale blue linen dress bought from a thrift store. Her shoes were the same pair she wore the day Martin Hale threw her manuscript away. Her hair was pinned back, a few strands escaping like they always did. She brought her notebook, just in case. The ballroom shimmered, glass chandeliers, champagne towers, and a crowd dressed in money. Agents, editors, critics, all there, all shining. No one recognized her. Not when she passed Martin Hale, who now clutched his whiskey like it might steady his pride. Not when Clara Voss complimented her earrings and turned away before hearing a name. Not when Simon Trent talked over her, eyes glued to his phone. Then the host took the stage. "A debut novel," he said, "that reminded the world why we believe in stories." The room hushed. The author behind The Ember Feather is here tonight. She gave children a hero and gave the industry a mirror. A pause. Breath held. "Please welcome Nora James." The ballroom froze. She rose. Not in vengeance, in grace. Each step echoed like prophecy on marble. Heads turned. Glasses tilted mid-sip. Clara choked on her champagne. Martin's grip on his glass slipped. Nora reached the podium, opened her notebook, and said calmly, "You mocked the story before turning the page. Now, the whole world reads it." Silence. Then a ripple. A wave. Applause, raw, rising, undeniable. She didn't bow. She just looked up, steady, and smiled. They built their careers on ego. Hers was built on truth. By morning, the publishing world was on fire. Clips from the gala flooded social media. The speech, the silence, the look on Martin Hale's face when Nora said her name. A hashtag trended within hours, #You mocked magic. Blogs unearthed the stories, the recycling bin incident, the rejection letters, the viral ridicule. Readers connected the dots, and they were angry. Crownwell Press released a statement calling Hale's actions regrettable. It didn't help. Within a week, he was demoted to junior acquisitions. His sleek office was reassigned to someone half his age, and his inbox filled with memes. "You threw away our hero." Clara Voss fared no better. A leaked internal email revealed her comment. "We don't take magic from moms." The backlash was swift. Authors dropped her. Her fantasy imprint at Pinnacle was quietly dissolved. Simon Trent's agency bled talent overnight. Writers demanded their contracts back, citing his lack of vision. His golden-stamped letterhead, once a mark of prestige, was mocked online with captions like, "The man who rejected the ember." No lawsuits, no public outbursts, just silence from Nora. She didn't have to gloat. She didn't have to say a word. The world was already rewriting the ending for her. Her mailbox once held rejection. Now it held redemption. The drawer where she used to keep rejection letters was full again, but this time it overflowed with thank yous, handwritten notes in crayon, typed emails printed out and folded twice, pages taped with glitter and stickers from school kids who had never loved a book until The Ember Feather. "I used to think I was just the background character, but now I know I'm the hero of my own story." Ava, 11. "Finn made me brave enough to tell my dad I want to write." Logan, 14. One letter was from a mother in Arizona. "My son is autistic, he doesn't speak much, but after reading your book, he said, 'Mom, I think I'm like Finn.'" Another came from a prison library in Nebraska. The inmates had passed one copy around for weeks, leaving penciled annotations in the margins. "Thank you for reminding us we're not forgotten." Nora read every letter, not quickly, not all in one sitting. She took her time, like someone unwrapping a gift they never thought they'd deserve. Some days, she'd reread her old rejection drawer too, not to relive the pain, but to marvel at the distance. From not good enough to you saved my child. The words had changed, but she hadn't. She was still that woman with a pen, a story, and something stubborn inside her that refused to disappear. Legends don't end, they continue in quiet corners. The new apartment was small, but it had warmth, real heat, real windows, a real bed for June, who now slept beneath glow-in-the-dark stars, and a poster of Finn Wilder taped to the wall. Nora still wrote at the kitchen table, but this one didn't wobble. She'd bought it secondhand with her first royalty check, along with a bookshelf, a kettle that whistled, and a lamp with soft yellow light. June sat nearby with a coloring book, humming to herself, completely unaware that her mother had become the voice of a generation. Nora opened a new notebook. The first page was blank. Not intimidating, not heavy, just quiet, waiting. She took a breath, wrote, Finn couldn't sleep. The ember feather was glowing again. She paused, smiled. It wasn't pressure now. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't desperation. It was story. It was love. It was the same as it had always been. Just a woman, a pen, and the hope that words could still matter. And somewhere, though she didn't know it yet, a child across the world was waiting. Not for fame, not for answers, but for magic. She walked in wearing linen. She left wearing legacy. Months later, Nora walked into a bookstore in a town she'd never been to before. She didn't announce herself. She didn't have to. There, in the center display, stood the ember feather. Next to it, a hand-lettered sign that read, Author, N.J. James, Writing that Changed Everything. A little girl stood in front of the stack, clutching a copy to her chest. She looked up at her mother and whispered, Do you think she's real? Nora smiled and stepped aside. Near the counter, a young clerk was restocking shelves. He noticed her watching, then tilted his head. You look familiar, he said. Are you? She shook her head gently, just browsing. But as she turned to leave, he called out, Thank you for the words. She paused, didn't turn around, just lifted a hand in quiet acknowledgement. Then she stepped into the sunlight, her linen dress brushing at her calves, her bag light but her name heavy in the hearts of readers around the world. She wasn't chasing anything anymore. No validation, no revenge, no spotlight. Only the next chapter. Because legends don't roar. Sometimes they whisper. And the world listens anyway. If this story stayed with you, share it. Someone out there needs to believe again. Leave a comment. Pass it on. Because the next Nora, she's probably writing in silence right now.